thank you for being here. Also, thank you to you, Diane, Robert, the sweet friends of mine that came over all the way to listen to this presentation. The title of this presentation is Art, Mushrooms, and the Fascinating World Beneath Us. Actually, I wanted to start off by sharing with you my motivation for starting to work with this in the first place. And for me, the biggest motivation has to do with realizing that we collectively as a species are facing the biggest threat that we could have right now, which is the destruction of our biosphere. And mushrooms might be one of those little things that could hold the key to actually improve things as they are right now. I'm a firm believer that nature is intelligent, we are intelligent, and we are nature, and we can learn so much from nature. There's this concept called biomimicry, but I would also pivot that biomimicry and say that within the context of mushrooms, within that context, mycomimicry could also be something that's extremely valuable for us. So yeah, that's the biggest motivation. So the term mycology, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that or have ever heard that word, but basically it's the branch of biology that focuses on fungi. And the whole world seems to be split between people who like mushrooms, for example, and we call them mycophilic. But then we have, unfortunately, the bigger majority of people who actually have this sort of like negative feel about mushrooms, like they're not really too crazy about them, and we will call them mycophobic. Now, there are a lot of reasons for being scared of mushrooms. Of course, if you eat the wrong mushroom, you might die. So they can be poisonous, they can be very scary, but at the end of the presentation, what I would like to do is to at least make you all a little bit more curious about mushrooms and to perhaps turn from mycophobic to mycophilic. So one little fact that it really blew my mind is becoming aware of how closely related we are with mushrooms. As we know, all life on Earth is connected. Every species in ourselves is sharing a common ancestor with another species. And when we go back in time enough to the primordial life on Earth, which initially divided into 3 domains, one being the eukaryotes, where 3 kingdoms emerge from it, which are the plants, the animals, and the fungi. It's really interesting to find out that animals, we are actually closer related to fungi than we are to plants. So when you think of mushrooms, I would like you to think in terms of, okay, it's not a plant, and it's not an animal. It is something in between. And we have a lot of similarities to mushrooms. I think the biggest one, or like the easiest one to remember, is the fact that we animals, we breathe in oxygen and release CO2. Now we know that plants do the opposite through photosynthesis. Now mushrooms are just like us. They breathe in oxygen and they release CO2. And that's a really key thing to know if you ever get into cultivating them. Looking at the anatomy of like a very generic mushroom, you'll find that, okay, there is a cap and there is a stem. In the cap is where the mushroom would produce the spores and release them into the environment. But what most people don't know is that what we call mushroom is only a very small part of the larger organism. And the larger part of the organism lives underground, and it's called mycelium. And actually mycelium makes up to 95% of the total biomass of the whole being. So this is what mycelium would look like. And actually I grew this sculpture myself. Maybe I can pass it around so you can look at it. So this is what mycelium would look like on a petri dish made out of agar. And so what I did with the one that I'm showing there is, so I literally went to the supermarket to Edeka, and I bought an oyster mushroom, and I cut it in half, and then I took a little sample of the flesh of the mushroom, and then I put it on the plate. And then as you see, it starts growing this sort of thread-like structure, and that's what's called mycelium. And that's how it would look like with a macro lens. So it's very thin. It's 1 cell thick, and it grows really fast. And what's really interesting about the mycelium is that it literally lives everywhere. So in every soil, everywhere on the planet, pretty much, besides of obviously deserts and oceans, but they truly live everywhere. And something that something that scientists are now beginning to comprehend is what role mycelium plays in nature. And apparently, this network of threads called mycelium, it's actually connected to all the trees. So there wouldn't be trees if it wasn't for mushrooms. So they sort of like build this symbiotic relationship and exchange minerals. And yeah, so if it wasn't for mushrooms, there would also not be soil. Because what mycelium does is it acts as a decomposer. So all organic matter that ends up dying, whether it's plants or animals, decompose and go back to the soil. And that's what mushrooms do. And actually, one pretty mind-blowing fact about the mycelium is that if you were to take just 1 tablespoon of soil in a forest, for example, there would be up to 13 kilometers of mushroom mycelium if you were to like extend the whole thread, and that would be enough to go to Görlitz, from Görlitz of our factory to Mitte and then back. And also another thing that a lot of people don't know is that the single largest living organism that we know of is a mushroom, and it's literally called the humongous fungus. And it lives in Oregon, and it's just 1 cell thick, and it's crazy also to think that they figured out how old it is, and it's 2,600 years old. Okay, so that was a little bit of the theory. Now in terms of cultivating mushrooms, and I will get into the art for sure, but cultivating mushroom it can be quite nice, but also it's quite hard. It really narrows down to either capturing the spores of the mushrooms or taking a sample. And here, what you see on the left, it's what's called a spore print, and that's a little experiment that you might want to do. If you ever have a mushroom that has a cap, you can cut the cap and then you just leave it on paper, and then it will start releasing the spores and it will create that beautiful shape. So say that you have the spores or a sample, then you would, for example, use a glove box that didn't have space to bring it over, and then you would put it, for example, on an agar dish. And then if you want to grow, then you would need to like choose a medium for the mushroom to grow. And different species of mushrooms like different mediums. But for example, wood chips or sawdust or soybean hulls or even coffee, it could be a medium. Most or a lot of the agricultural waste can actually be used as a substrate. Yeah. So then then if you want to grow, then you can put it in a bag or in a jar. And what's really important is to actually, and that's what really can be a bit of a pain to everyone who get involved with growing mushrooms, is the fact that they're very sensitive, very fragile, and any type of contamination, bacteria or so, would basically kill them. So everything has to be sterilized, and ideally in a laboratory with an autoclave, but if not, a pressure cooker will also do the job. So once everything's been sterilized, then the spores can be injected, and I have another sample. I'll show you here. So that's a fully grown mycelium inside a jar. Is the oyster, is the one that was cloned from the supermarket. Oh yeah. And that's the time lapse. We can see the mycelium growing. I also have a few bags there in the back, like you can actually see the whole process. Some of the bags are looking like that. Now, what happens when things are not sterilized? And also the reason why I had to move this presentation for 1 month is because everything got contaminated, and that's how it looks like. It's really gross. And so what happens is that the mushroom will start competing for food, and then so that there's mold in the bottom, and then the mushroom in the top. And after they come closer together, they start fighting, and most of the times the mold would win. In this case, the mushroom actually wins. So it's killing the mold. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Oh. Yeah, it's okay. All right. Yeah, so the mushroom basically won and took over the whole jar. Now, so once you have colonized your substrate, then you get to choose what to do next. If you're growing mushrooms for eating, obviously you would want to let them fruit. And I have a bag over there in the back that's starting to fruit the mushrooms, and you can actually see the pins are starting to show up, and they're pink because those are growing pink oysters. So if you wanna eat them, then you let them grow, and that's kind of like how it look like in the time lapse. And again, these are pink oysters. They're really yummy, by the way. You can eat them. And it's quite magical to actually see this happening. And obviously, this is a time lapse, but actually they double in size every day. So one day they look like super tiny, and then you come back home and they're really huge. So that's what you can do if you want to eat them, right? You can like fruit them. But if you want to try something a little bit different, which is what I've been trying to figure out, and so what I've been trying to do is basically to grow different shapes and sculptures using mushrooms. And I'm by far not the first person that's doing this, or at least trying to. So I would like to show you actually a few applications. So you remember this mycelium that was growing into a medium and eating it and becoming white. So imagine that instead of growing that mycelium inside a plastic bag or the jar that I gave you guys, you could literally grow it and let it take a shape. And some people are, for example, doing bricks and experimenting with that. And they have built beautiful installations, for example, here at MoMA. And here is literally a tiny house where they grew the mushroom in between the walls. And why would you want to do that? Okay, so number one, mushroom mycelium, after you have grown it into the shape, and you have to kill the living mushroom basically, and you put it in an oven, for example, so it solidifies. And after it solidifies, it happens to be a very interesting material. So, for example, it's fireproof, it's water repellent, it floats, it's a great isolator of temperature, and that's why some people are starting to use that. Now, that's for construction, but believe it or not, this is happening already. There's a company in the US that has been replacing styrofoam with mushroom grown packaging. And we all know how damaging styrofoam is for the environment, and it's something that you only use once and then you throw it out. It takes 500 years to decompose, whereas using mushroom for packaging is not only biodegradable, but it is a fertilizer, so you just like throw outside and it's all good. And I think IKEA is moving into this too. Okay, so this is also an area that I'm very fascinated about, and obviously I'm not gonna lie to you, this looks very strange, but yeah, I mean, you can grow mushrooms and take the form of a table, or like lampshades and stools and so on, and what else could it be? Don't know, but that is possible. So in terms of using mushroom as a way to replace leather, that's something that's happening already. So the that one is taken out of, I forgot the name, but it's a very big dry mushroom, and then I don't know how many of you are familiar with kombucha, but basically the SCOBY, that mushroom thingy that kind of grows in the top. Some people are growing that and letting them take form, and then they dry them, they treat them with different, I don't know how they do it, but then they have like this leather here, which looks really crazy, but who knows, maybe if we know better processes and ways of utilizing mushrooms, we might have actually nice materials to use. Still, this is very experimental, obviously, especially the one on the right. Yeah, and then we have, like artists, 3D printing, shapes with mushroom, and then letting them grow, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I didn't bring any pictures of my work, but basically it's there in the back. Yeah, so I've been growing sculptures, I've been learning that. It's quite tough though. I'm not gonna lie to you, because it's basically living with a working with a living organism that I don't know, like oxygen levels have to be fine, on point. Humidity levels have to be fine, fresh air exchange, so many factors. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can talk about that. just this is not made out of mushroom. This is another project that's coming up on Kickstarter very soon. It's inspired on the Mayan mushroom stones, and that's the magic toad that's kind of eating the mushroom. But no, but I have to say that unfortunately last night I had been growing the sculptures in the molds, and then I went to bake them, and I didn't let the mushroom grow enough and glue the material. So when I took them out of the mold, I opened them out of the oven. I opened the molds, and the whole thing just broke in half. So I was hoping to get a self-portrait, and that's what I have there in the back. The creepy sort of like face that's in the left. That's a mold, and it has mushroom inside. But I just didn't have enough time to sort of like let it grow. But yeah, so that's sort of like my experiments. I would like to look into improving the process, which I have been learning of YouTube and whatnot, and then hopefully have a proper exhibition with some pieces, and my goal really is to use that as a platform for making people more curious and interested about mushrooms, which so as a way of educating. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Is there any instant questions at this moment, or would you like to speak to him one-on-one? It's gone very quiet, okay. It's the mushroom time.